Welcome everybody. It's another episode. It's another week. We've had a massive tournament. It was Katowice this weekend, and I'm here to talk about everything CS that's happened in the past week with Natu.
How you doing?
How are you doing? You just survived the event, bro. So it's on you right now to prove that you are in fact still sane.
I survived a food poisoning. Had a bit of that. Solid 16 hours in bed. One of the days, and so did our talent manager Jacob as well. We both
so you got caught by the same thing?
Not sure about it. It makes sense, right? We're eating a lot of the same foods and whatnot, and we both had similar symptoms. But it is what it is. We
don't need to go into details. It's all right. We can go ahead and gloss over that part. It's fine.
But other than that, it was a solid week. It went by really fast. Fun times as usual. Working with the usual suspects for the most part, and Counter-Strike, a lot of interesting results. Obviously, Astralis now probably our number one team. FaZe coming in. Overall, I thought it was cool. Also, great to see that even though VP bombed out, still a shit ton of people showed up.
A packed stadium. Probably wasn't as hype as it could have been.
Well, it was pretty hype actually. I mean, I remember. I think probably one of the top three most hyped games that I have been at was in Katowice in 2015 NIP Fnatic finals. So even then, VP wasn't playing, and still the atmosphere was great. So, I mean, you could tell as it was a best of five. It dragged along till pretty late. The kids had to go home, and all that stuff. So it kind of mellowed down as the best of five progressed. But for the first couple of maps. It was pretty loud out there.
I mean, it's rough too, because I was wondering about that. They played both semis and the finals of StarCraft 2 that same day on the final on the main stage, right? And then the finals of StarCraft 2 goes the full 7 maps, goes the distance, and I'm like, they're not starting this shit on time. And then so I'm thinking, okay, they're going to start it like right after StarCraft 2. The players are going to set up. It's going to be great, and then Hardwell steps onto the stage, and I was like, oh, okay. It's like 7 p.m. in the evening, and we still haven't started a best of 5 grand finals for Counter-Strike.
Yep.
It's like,
and then he had a phase when he had the first map, and he knew it's going to be a long night. It's going to drag along till midnight.
As soon as FaZe wins that, I'm just like, they're not ending this until 1 or 2 in the morning. That's it. It's done. Like this is gonna go 4 maps now at least.
Yeah.
And we're gonna be in for a while. It wasn't
far off from full 5 either.
It was like Inferno last map was pretty good of the finals.
Yes. If FaZe wouldn't have fucked up round number 2, second half, I call it would have been 5 maps.
But it didn't happen that way. Natu.
Nope. It definitely
didn't happen that way. Instead, we have Astralis as the king star, the North Star, shining brightest in the sky. Everybody, all paths essentially lead to Astralis.
Apparently, yeah. No, I mean, I think it makes sense. They have the honor of calling themselves number 1 right now, even though we didn't get to see the next chapter and the massive the battle between the big 3 right now, SK, VP, Astralis. But it's not Astralis' fault that SK and VP decided not to go through the group stages. Well,
apparently that's the tournament format's fault, according to
right, yeah. Yep, sure, 100%.
So
definitely not. If you're VP, you lose on like 3 of your best maps against 3 different teams in a group stage. You've earned your faith. You've done it yourself.
Across 5 maps, let's say, as well. 5 maps total.
Yeah, I know.
It's not even like it's 2 best of 1s and you're out.
Yep. I don't think it really leaves a lot of room for explanations. It's just, I think explanations are always for losers. I'm not really sure if Taz was being sarcastic or you never know with that guy, right? So, yeah, you can never take him. You always have to take him with a pinch of salt. So I'm not sure. There was a lot of salt in those messages, obviously, but you know what I mean. I'm not sure if it was 100% genuine about what he said in his tweets.
I don't think so. I think Taz is a showman.
Yeah, it definitely is.
I think he knows how to just get people fired up and riled up, right? And so it's the same thing when the finals, Astralis won in the major, and he had to pick a fight with Kirby about like the wording of his tweet, where it's like, oh, you didn't play all out, great, we will crush you next time, like it's just that Taz, it's inherently part of his plan, I think, is to be a showman and get people fired up, which is what we need, right? So I don't even see it as a downside. It's just Taz being Taz, knowing how to get people talking.
I just noticed, like, when I was in Katowice, just because of these teams, they spend so much time together right now. I mean, there's tournament every week pretty much in the past few weeks, right? So it seems like there's this certain tension building around these teams, even though they're mates, of course, as usual.
Still mates.
But you can notice, there's, people are some might be a little bit cocky in their own way, they don't maybe. They're not that intentionally, maybe, but it's just kind of there because of how they've been doing recently, and other people don't maybe like it as much. There's just a lot of talk between the teams. That there's little grudges here and there, which is obviously great. I think it should be that way. It's a part of being as it's a part of sports, it should be a part of esports as well. Which is I thought it's just genius. It's great that Taz is trying to find that fire through. Just literally digging through a tweet word for word, just finding that fire from it. So, it's something that I find fascinating.
Well, it's part of the spirit of competition, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's like you can't have compelling stories and tension and everything if everybody's just best buds. Then it's no fun. Then they're just competing. They're just competing. But like, people want the drama. People want there to be shit flung from one team to the other. And so when you tune into that match, that there's more than just the match on the line. There's bragging rights on the line. You talked shit last time. Great. You're going to shut that guy up, or that guy is going to be vindicated. It's there's all sorts of layers to it. So it's good. I'm glad. I wish we kind of had a little bit more of of that kind of action, not necessarily just from Taz, but from other players as well, where, you can kind of poke at each other, poke fun a little bit, and get people fired up about the match that's going to come. I mean, we got a long time until the next LAN. That's the other thing that I think you were leading into, right? Is the fact that there's a big break now in LANs. We don't have we have a lot of Pro League, we have a lot of online play, but we don't have any LANs.
Which is good from a competitive aspect, because now again we'll have a bit of time like before the major, where teams have time to redefine themselves, study what the mistakes they've done, especially for a team like FaZe, obviously, who made it all the way to the finals. Now, they have the ability to find new dimensions and different ways to play, because a lot of the stuff they were doing, for example, was very basic, but it applies to every team. And it will elevate the level of play when there are these kind of breaks for teams, even though they have to play online leagues and whatnot, but they will always treat them to an extent as proof, like a testing ground. They'll give themselves a little bit of leeway. Of the results do matter, but you know what I mean, right? And and they'll try different things. I think this is definitely a positive thing after having these tournaments, having the major, having Vegas, having Katowice. This is good. There'll be a few weeks for the teams to, first of all, be home, because people need to be home every now and again, but also time to practice and regather their thoughts on how do they go forward.
Yep. No, you're 100% on the money. It's fun when you talk to I got to talk with Kerrigan for a little bit in Vegas, and I was like, you got a lot on your plate when it comes to online. He's like, well, actually not too much. Like, I think he was thinking about the next week that was going to happen, right? I think we have like one best of two that we'll be playing as far as official. So it gives us plenty of time to prac. And then when it comes to that match, which is, air quotes official, basically Kerrigan, I mean, this is the thing though, is that this is why you can't necessarily always take online seriously, is because people like the players, the in-game leaders, they just treat it as glorified prac, as like is kind of just, it's official. It does, we're just going to use it to test everything. So we prac for a few days, we get some scrims in, we test out some new theories, and then you kind of like, there's just a little bit more intensity when you get that online game, so you can test and see, okay, what we developed in prac, does it actually work in just, in like a half competitive kind of sense, and then you can kind of make changes and then lead into LAN with it, where on LAN, then you can really take what was tested in scrims, what was tested in online, then you bring it into LAN and you polished it, right?
Yeah. I mean, the difference is back in the days, if we go a few years ago, teams practice to win practices. Now teams practice to fine-tune details, different ways of how to play, all that kind of jazz. And now official games online have become that proving ground of when you're actually playing for the score as well. So then you will apply the theories you have and whatever protocols you've come up with for specific situations in an actual real time, like a real situation where the score does matter. So it is glorified practice in that sense, but at the same time, people still want to qualify for these finals of these online tournaments since they have massive prize pools as well. So it is, kind of a mixed situation for
balancing act.
Yeah, exactly, for all of them.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Katowice, because there's a bunch of good stuff to get into. I mean, last week we talked a lot about NIP and what to expect from NIP going into the tournament, what we'd seen so far, and now it's like NIP they didn't really get into it. They started strong. They definitely started strong. First 2 matches of the groups for them, and we were even watching. As we were recording the podcast, we were watching that first match versus Fnatic, where it went 16-14 on Cash. And then they go into overtime versus Astralis, but both of them losses for NiP. And then they were never ever like they weren't quite able to recover after that, right? Like they got 1 win out of 5 maps in that group stage.
Yeah, I mean, it is gutting now. Everyone's going to be talking about they're going to be changing their lineup, what needs to be done. But it's hard to start making massive drastic changes when you've had the kind of scorelines you've had in those games. You'd really have to go dwell into the nitty gritty of those games and details of how did the scorelines come up actually. I mean, we didn't actually. I don't think we covered. How many of those games did we cover? I'm not sure because there was 2 games going simultaneously all the time.
One was on the mainstream.
Yeah, one of them
was. NiP was on the mainstream.
Yeah, exactly. That was the one that was, and then the rest of them weren't. So that was the one I've seen. And I mean, for me, I mean, the massive difference is that they have like the similar style of play they had last year when they had their stride going on, but it's just a striking fact is that just. I mean, people hate to talk about confidence, it's something we try to steer away from, but it's a fact that a lot of the situations, the way they approach situations and how they play the 3-on-3s and such, when you need to be really reactive and you need to read plays correctly, or when you need to be aggressive and all that kind of stuff, there was hesitation a lot of the times. Like that final little push that needs to be a part of what the things you're doing seems to be just missing. And when you have players like Get Right, for example, just being absolutely absent, he's had a terrible time the last few months for a lot of reasons. He was making massive tweets about how he's been going through a rough patch recently, all that kind of jazz. Obviously, those kind of things are going to affect your team when a player like him is not playing up to his standards. But even a player like Forrest, who lives from being a free roaming aggressive player who's given a kind of a area of the map, though, this is where you're going to be at, and then you'll do your thing within that area, right? Even him seeming a little static, every now and again you see a glimpse of him doing his things, but when it's not happening constantly, you see NIP is not doing well. So it's just like it seems like they kind of need to, even though they've had some time since the early part of the year have been quiet for them, but they need to have a couple of those wins. If they would have, let's say if they would have won that first game 16-14, it could have turned out totally differently for them in the tournament. They could have had that beginning to a tournament where they're going to feel good, finally they're going to be on the right side of a close game, and then again they go and lose on overtime against Astralis as well. Those kind of hits, they're just going to diminish your confidence even more, and they're going to affect the way the individuals think in those situations. Even though we're talking about championship level players who've gone through everything in the last 5 years, would you been hit enough? Those kind of things start affecting you, no matter how much experience or no matter how much winning you've had in the past.
Well, I mean, you got to real quick, guys. We talked a lot about this topic as well last week with Shoxy, and he gave a lot of great insight as well into what he thinks is going on in the NiP mind. So we're going to head, Phil. We're going to timestamp this moment and put a link for last week's podcast as well. So if people want to go and hear what Shocks had to say about NIP as well, real interesting stuff. We had a great discussion for like 20 minutes last week in last week's podcast. So we'll put a link and a timestamp to that. So go and check it out. And if you want to know more about like just what we think is happening with NIP. But I mean, NIP wasn't they got bodied by FaZe after that, basically after that overtime loss. They clearly just didn't get their heads into the game. And they were able to come back again because they go up against Immortals next. And you got to be thinking, okay, well, FaZe, we just lost a massive overtime to Astralis. We're destroyed. Great. You need a map to recover. They come into Immortals. They're clearly trying to get into that old mindset of like, we are the dominant team. Immortals are these like, the second tier, second string Brazilian team. We should be able to run game on these guys. They lose 16-14 again, not able to close the map. And then they get their one win of the group phase, which is against Optic, who went 0-5 in the fucking group. So, I mean, it's you get a win in the end. So you end on that with a W. But then at the same time, who did you get the win against? It was basically the worst team in the tournament. They're the only team that went 0-5. And this is not even like this is talking about like Group B, the stacked group of death. That was just a nightmare if you got placed into Group B. Even the bottom teams there were 2-3. They were picking up some maps. Optic. If we want to talk about teams that are in a downward spiral, Optic, right now it's looking grim. When it comes to NIP for me, it all boils down to just confidence right now. I think is the main thing. Right has had a rough few months, and that sort of thing will take its toll. But it's also something that I think with time you will get out of. But what's going to be necessary for them if they attend Star Series? I'm not sure if they're going to be a Star Series next, but that's the next big LAN. Is they like NIP? I think what would be key is a strong start in the groups. Like they will need to win that first map. It's almost like when you bring in a new player, and you want to have a strong start to it to get him acclimated, to get everybody confident in the system, to keep going right. I think NIP, it's going to be just so important for them to win their first map of the next group phase that they're in, because if we don't want this slump to last half the year, right? Like they need something to get the fires going.
Definitely, yeah. And worth noting, if I'm not mistaken, I think Exist actually had a really good tournament.
He did, but he was the only thing that was keeping him in these matches at some times, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's tough. Hold on, we can take a look at the. He's definitely not going to feature high. Well, he's actually not too bad. I mean, Exist had a 1.0 rating, 107 or 105. So I mean, he was actually fairly high up there considering how many teams, how many players there were in this. He was in the top half of the percent. So I mean, it's like Exist was there, but then you got to scroll a long way down to find Forest, and Forest was the runner-up, right?
Yeah.
So, and he wasn't even 1.0 rating; he was 0.95 or something, 0.93. So Jesus, I think what's really just like distressing is to find get right at 0.8 at the bottom of the stats.
Yeah,
that's tough. Tarek bottomed out 0.71, but I mean, these are just ratings, guys, and these are basically just stats and kills and all that sort of stuff. But it is tough to see players like that down there at the bottom, especially when you're talking about one of the key players for NIP. The real question is though, is like, will Get Right come back from this? Absolutely. Man's got the work ethic of a monster. Like, he just never stops. So will he be able to find his way out of this? I think so, definitely. So it's just a matter of time now for NIP, I think. Like, just get that confidence.
Yeah, it is true. And then, I mean, I guess the eternal conversation of, do they need a dedicated opera? Apparently, Forrest wants to steer away from it, even though he's been really good at being like an aggressive opera type of a person, all that kind of stuff. It's also, I think, irrelevant if you want to dwell more into it, but I'm sure you guys did that last week.
Well, we kind of touched on it. I mean, it's like back to the fifth days, right, where nobody wanted to opt fifth ops because he had to, and it's kind of like, well, this is when they were at their most dangerous, I suppose, is because you had Michael Elia, and Michael Elia wanted to op, and he would take the op, and he would be aggressive with the op, and then the rest of the team could play off of that. In this sort of scenario now, you're kind of relying on OG NIP in the sense that everybody's just got rifles, and you're gonna have somebody go batshit every round and just get you 2 kills, which is basically was Exist's job this tournament, it seems, to just go batshit and try and hard carry. And it wasn't enough. It's not enough right now when you've got teams when you've got teams with a system and with clear roles that everybody is just fucking owning, like Astralis, like you're not going to be able to beat a team like that without somebody just going completely apeshit. And it's far too random to rely on. I mean, do we want to even touch on?
Nah, I don't think it's worth. That could be an episode of its own.
I mean, one thing, and we talked a little bit about this before the podcast went live, but one thing that was interesting was Fnatic making some definite improvements for sure.
Yeah, I mean, my concern with the lineup was the fact that, I guess it helps that they had the experience through the first time they swapped between Godsend and Fnatic, where the Godsend core or the core from Fnatic that went to Godsend thought that they could just continue on doing the same things with this lineup, and things would, just figure out themselves. But obviously that was not the case. They've been, getting shit on or shat on enough for them to realize that they need to reinvent themselves a lot of the time. And now it was I was actually surprised to see that there was actual structure. They hadn't forgotten their identity. There was still that kind of out of this world kind of, very ballsy kind of contact plays. All of Meister just pop flashing his way through cache main to forklift, getting an entry, and then everyone just swarming the side afterwards type of a play style. But then when you have the addition of structured executes, molotoving everywhere, smoking, having a rhythm, then when you can combine those two worlds and people are hitting their shots, I think it can be a very deadly combination. And I was very much happy to see that they've actually done strides. Probably a lot to do with Jumpy, who is a good tactical mind. The only concern that you should have in this is that the players are open for his suggestions and do listen to him when he's talking. And they've agreed upon that. It's everyone just needs to sit down and realize that we're shit right now in the great scheme of things, in their own standards, and they need to find new ways how to win. And at least for me, Katowice was a evidence that they've understood their situation, and they're ready to work for finding that new level again.
No, it's probably. I'm trying to refresh real quick where they even wound up. Yeah.
They lost to Immortals in a
Masters the week before. I think that was the real wake up call, where it's like you got issues if you get stomped by Gambit, right?
Yeah. I think the only dent in Fnatic's image in Katowice was the way they went out. If I'm not mistaken, they were up like 12-3 or something after a T-half on Mirage against Immortals. I'm pretty sure it was something along those lines, and they played great.
And then it was a 13-2 return from Immortals on Jesus.
Yeah. That was like the only, if you want to look at it from a disappointing point of view, then obviously they should have closed that one out. But if you look at the big picture, it was still definitely a step forward for them, and I'm expecting them to be a team that will be there competing for playoffs, for semifinals, for finals, for tournament wins down the line. If they keep on working as they were, seeing glimpses of the Olofmeister of old, that was great. Mm-hmm. Not as consistently as we're used to, obviously, from the way back, but still seeing a bit of flash from the past from him, just doing confident plays, going in, feeling the game, find the right rhythm, the flow. It was fun to see.
I mean, this is there's always that evolution, right, of how I think when it came to Olofmeister in his prime, it was very like the meta really fit, because if you were going to play aim heavy, duel heavy, skill confidence heavy, right, where at the time, right, between Fnatic and LDLC, later Envy, right, it was the happy style, right? It was all about running gun, just go fucking running into each other, looking for headshots, and then whoever emerged, like that was like this Viking Olofmeister that's perfect. You got the battle that's fucking clashing, both armies going in, dust everywhere, nobody sees anything, and this guy's just hacking heads off left and right with an axe, right? It was like perfect for him. It wasn't the siege. It wasn't like a Na'Vi or like even an SK back then with Fallen, how structured SK were. Yes, they had the potential for explosive play, But most of the time it was a siege. It was just one step at a time, thorough structure. You're moving in, you're building your siege units. Okay, there's cold zero with one op and falling with the other. We're talking towers here, obviously, right? You know, and they're slowly grinding you down, moving forward until they finally breach the castle walls, and that's it. It's all over, right? And Fnatic definitely struggled. They were hiding in their castle, making soup out of their shoes, you know, at the end, basically, because they didn't have anything left. So it's good to see that Fnatic are learning that they need to kind of build up that castle a bit more here, have a stronger structure to fall back on. And I think that's going to be like the main thing that going forward now, it always goes full circle. You go structured, right? Like the very games times versus NiP, that was like the clash of loose versus structure. And then you get more structured, more and more towards the SK basically coming through with like very structured. Na'Vi at the time was Zeus at the Reigns, very structured. You know, you had that kind of structured play, and then Fnatic and LDLC fucked all that up, and they went back into the loose NiP era. And now it's like we're rehashing a little bit. But right now it's like you get that hybrid. Like we're in that kind of hybrid mode where it's like you need to have the explosiveness, but you also need to have, if things aren't working with the explosive style, you need to have a few strats that you can rely on in your pocketbook. Then it all comes down to like in game. You go to your strats and they don't work. Then what? And actually, you're an in-game leader now too, so we can ask you. You know, it's like shit. You know, if your boys aren't hitting shots and then you actually go for a strat and it doesn't work either, what is the what's going through your head at that point?
We're fucked.
So yeah, that's pretty much what it boils down to.
What are you going to do if our defaults are not working? If people are not hitting their shots, if we're doing an execute and no one's getting any kills, what the hell you do? You call a timeout. You tell your boys, what the fuck's going on? What did you have this morning? Did you not sleep well? Wasn't your pillow right? Did you not have your cereal for breakfast? Or what the hell's going on here? I mean, it'll always come down to people hitting their shots, feeling the game. And no matter what you do, it's always going to be a very, very like a central part of being successful, no matter what.
The struggle. I mean, speaking of the struggle, FaZe. We got to touch a little bit on them. We'll close on Katowice, I think, with Astralis.
Sure.
But I want to talk a little bit about FaZe and the fact that the system so far seems to be, well, speaking of structured but yet pug style, because I mean they're still figuring out how to work NiKo in. So there's a lot of snap calls and stacking sites, but also just default plays that every pug, every FPL, whatever you're gonna know this through and through, because that's how, if you just put a team together and you're still trying to figure out who's gonna play where, that's what you fall back on. But then you have that added zing, that spice, that ghost pepper of a NiKo, put in there basically.
Habanero.
Dude, just wrecking fools left and right with deals and whatnot. So I mean, what was your impression like coming into this, thinking, okay, what are we going to expect out of NiKo and FaZe? Did they live up to your expectations, or did they completely surpass them? Like, what were you expecting out of them?
I mean, I talked with NiKo before. We were on the same flight from Frankfurt with Janko and NiKo, so we were talking about how they had a whopping 3 days to practice, and then obviously they had 2 spare days during the tournament to do things. But I mean, for me at least, I think the approach they had was on point. They kept it simple enough where it was a lot of wolf packing. We had like 3 guys going to one area, then you had one individual holding one place and the other another angle basically, and then that 3-man unit was trying to gain ground, trying to make a trade or get an entry or get a trade kill, and then afterward they'll do something and execute simple enough that they'll have a possibility of winning a round. So you could see it in a lot of the things they were doing, like for example in the finals against Astralis on Cash, for example, just the way they kind of tried to earn their opponents' respects by playing a very contact play, kind of just going straight towards a bomb site, just molotoving everywhere, smoking, flashing, going in, things that are easily gone through, in a span of a couple of days, and then just utilizing that explosiveness that they have within those individuals. And then when you have, like you pointed out, players pretty much the whole their lineup, not even NiKo, the whole friggin' lineup has so much individual skill that they can grind themselves into any round, that even if they're in a 2-on-5, no matter if they have deagles, you're always gotta have to respect them for what they are. And I think those kind of ingredients are it's just very dangerous to play against. And I mean, they kept it, to sum it in a nutshell, they kept it in simple enough. And you could tell from the little things they were doing. For example, Inferno, the fourth map of the finals against the Astralis. You saw they win the pistol in the second half. I said, all right, we're going to map number 5, boys. It's happening. And then you see them going 5 quad on A without smoking off pit, and then, you know, at least molotoving something, just going to the bomb site. Instead, they get into a crossfire. They get absolutely just bum fucked. And then, you know, it collapses.
They won both pistols and lost both force spies.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean,
that's painful.
So many small little things that they screwed up on. Or the Dupree 1-on-3 on Nuke, lower bomb site. You know, everyone's, you know, casual viewers were looking at it like, wow, Dupree. He's wrecking bitches right now. And I'm there looking at, what the fuck is FaZe doing? Like, what are those 2 guys coming from ramp doing? Are they not talking? Is there no communication going on here? Is everyone just tunnel visioning the situation where, you know, NiKo should have said, I'm not sure what went through in their comms, but, you know, the way I see it is NiKo saying, I'm coming down the vent, and then the 2 guys who were coming down ramp, one of the 2 at ramp is going to dictate what they do. You know, let's go from the same side together. You know, we're going to trade it. And then the guy in the vent's going to say, all right, I'll come from vent. And when you guys initiate, I'm just going to run in. I'm going to trade it if neither of you gets the kill. What happens? One guy comes in, gets wrecked on. Keo comes in, doesn't hit a fucking bullet. And then NiKo, the last guy, I think he's the one that's going to get forgiven because he got absolutely shit on. Dupree had 2 bullets and he one-shots you. That's, you know, 1-on-1. Fair game. But like in the big picture, these kind of small things were the difference. And this is a team that's played together for a whopping few days. So I think in the big picture,
I mean, they brought 1 player in. Like there should still be like a core
obviously.
there.
Yeah. Fair enough.
You can't cut them too much slack. That's definitely
no.
Then again, in the finals, all that jazz, but
I think against a team like Astralis, I thought it was a very positive, like the way how the series progressed. If you take away those small mistakes, if they can learn from them and not do them in the future, you know, they're in a good place. And I think they're definitely a contender for being, you know, part of the top 3 best teams in the world.
I thought so as well. That's the one thing actually that's kind of fun. You bringing up the Dupree, and this is like how it changes as you. Let's say your view, right, changes as you learn more about the game and learn more about how things should work and work right in the game. Is that you quickly realize that yes, clutches are hype, but then clutches almost always come from somebody making mistakes.
Yeah.
Or like the opponents basically making a bunch of mistakes that allow for that one player to shine, right? So granted, it's still on the one player.
Though.
What's that?
Without even taking credit away from the player that clutched.
Absolutely not.
Massive amount of mistakes are usually happening.
There are outliers, right? Like the one that really stands out there. There's obviously the one that really stands out, but there are outliers where somebody just does something fucking magical, right? Like the simple no scope on Cash, the double right falling no scope and then into the no scope again. You know, okay. You can't really account for that if you're on the CT side, you know, if you're on the defense, right, or you're trying to defend that bomb, or you're the team with the man up. You can't really account for somebody doing something like that, and so that is truly like a magical moment. Yeah. But the majority of these kinds of clutches really do come from you. You almost have to stop yourself from just getting frustrated with the other team because you're just sitting there like, are they not communicating? Like you said, you know, like, are they not calling where this guy is? You know, as soon as they know it, they should be setting up to basically face him together. And you start to see teams, you'll start to see teams, you know, handle the situation appropriately. And that's actually almost when you get hype, when you're just like, that was a really nice double peek from the 2 of them. You could see them count it down, like 3, 2, 1, peek. And then they both peek from 2 different angles and boom, get it. You know, that's real satisfying CS.
When I brought this up right after the finals, I went back to Deltel. I saw Allu in the lobby holding a beer, looking sad as fuck. And I go there like, how you feeling, bro? Not good, man. Not good. Well, that's the way you're supposed to feel right now. So how about that 1-on-3 or 3-on-1 from your perspective against Dupree? Don't even talk about it. Don't even talk about it. I'm like, well, how about we do talk about it? How did you feel in that moment? Yeah, no one said a word pretty much in that situation. So yeah,
see, that's the kind of lockdown. That's the kind of stuff that's going to get.
I mean, I can put myself. I'll put myself in that situation. I've been in that situation. You know, you tunnel vision. You're what 12, 14 down. You're in a 3-on-1 situation. If you win this round, your opponent's going to be on eco. It's going to be 14-14. People are just bottled, like they're tunnel visioning, 100%. Like they're just thinking, get this round over with, kill that guy. Round is over. We're going to equalize the situation. We have a chance at winning this, instead of people, someone in the comms saying, speak up, take it easy. That's what I used to do a lot of times actually in my teams, is not even like telling them what's going on. Instead, I just tell them to speak up or just take it easy, mellow down, slow things down when things became hectic in those kind of situations, just to remind everyone to think rationally. But you can just tell how none of them was doing any of that. Instead, everyone was just thinking, let's get this round over with, because if we win this, we're gonna equalize the game. We have a chance of winning this map, So yeah, it's very frustrating to see that when you can put yourself in that situation. You've been in that situation so many times, and it's a massive freaking round in the finals.
Do you think that that's something that has to be, how do we say? I mean, obviously it has to be identified and worked on, but is that something that like goes away naturally with confidence in that setting, where it's like, okay, it's not every day that FaZe, like when was the last time that Allu was in a finals of a major tournament, and in these sorts of situations, right? So these sorts of players, like, it's not something that they're used to whereas, Astralis win the major finals. That's it. They finally got that weight off their shoulders. They don't have to stress about that anymore. They're top 4 at DreamHack Masters the week before, losing to the team that they beat in the major finals. And then they come in here, they're just thinking to themselves, like Astralis are going to be the ones who are just thinking to themselves, this is ours, right? Like, we got this. They have every single edge, and they're not going to be making any of those kinds of mistakes.
Yeah, I'm not sure where the difference comes exactly. Is it like a cultural thing or something? But I've always found throughout my 15 years in Counter-Strike that Swedes have been the best at these kind of small details. They're good at keeping the communication at the right level. Any situation, one of the, let's say in that 3-on-1, there's always going to be that one guy that's going to dictate the situation, is going to say the right words, which is then enabling the other guy to say something, and then everything will just work together. But whereas a lot of players from different countries just don't, like, they usually, like what happened with this FaZe situation, or I'm assuming did happen, is people just tunnel visioning and going into it like a racehorse, not seeing anything except for forward, and all they're thinking about is just ending this round. It should be a thing you can get rid of by applying protocols, reminding each other when we're in these situations, this is what we do, this is how everyone is, it should come with the experience when you're playing, and when you're in the right flow, in the right zone, these things should come naturally to you, and they should be easily fixable.
It does seem a lot to do with experience as a unit. Yeah. Now they actually have NiKo
as a unit.
I saw NiKo talking a lot as well, which is interesting, right? Whenever I went to a camera shot on the players, you could see NiKo communicating quite a bit. I do worry just a little bit about, are Kerrigan and him and the rest of the team going to be able to work with that, right? Or like accept. Because NiKo, there's so much, like, think about it from like the perspective of the 3 players that are actually picking up NiKo, well, 4 including Kerrigan, right? It's just like the major consensus is that he is like God, and that he is a gift, and that you have him on your team now. All eyes are on NiKo, that he can do no wrong, etc. So that you got to get through that mental baggage as well as a player, perhaps. Where it's just like, this guy's going to show up, he's going to start. He's going to get a lot of attention. He's going to start having pretty impactful rounds, and then if he's going to start calling as well, or having a say in the call, like, it's a lot that
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is, like, you can't be envious or jealous or anything like that. You can't let any of that get in the way, I suppose, if you're on the team. But I doubt that the players are really letting that come to it. It was just fun to see him talking a lot, and Keo wasn't really looking at him either. He was kind of just nodding, right? So I was like, okay, is Keo like listening or not, or like, or what's. It's going to be fun to see that dynamic between the two, because that team only seems to get stronger at that point. You have Kerrigan, and if they find the right balance between NiKo and Kerrigan, where NiKo can have his say, but Kerrigan's like got the overall thing, and then they find a structure to it where it's a system and everybody fits into the system, that team has got crazy potential. You have teams out there who don't even have like one in-game leader, let alone 2 viable options to call the shots for the team. So, I mean, FaZe is in a great place. It's going to be fascinating to watch, like, how they I mean, they're also trailblazing. I mean, they are a team that is international, communicating in English, right? To think that way back when, I mean, apart from the kind of like the fluke of what was it, Cologne 2015 in the semis, of being able to make it that deep with the G2 at the time, never really saw that kind of performance again, right? Are we going to? Is it now time that CS is like a game where it's capable, it's possible to have multinational teams forming, communicating in English, and getting deep into tournaments, which would be contrary to everything we've seen so far, where it's just like, the French or the Belgium, players together, Swedes with Swedes, Finns with Finns, Danes with Danes, and very, very close knit in that sense. So it's refreshing. It's actually very interesting to see how that's going to go. So we're back from the break. Sorry about that, guys. Getting back into it, we were talking about. We were talking about international teams basically, and that becoming a thing now, which is interesting. FaZe are obviously the front runners. They've been the main experiment for a long time, and now, is that something that we can expect to see more of in the future? What do you think about that, Natu?
Yeah, I think it's definitely viable. There's a lot, there's so many young talented players scattered around Europe now. We see kids getting into FPL that are really talented, all that kind of stuff, and I think it's definitely something players are thinking about more and more about. But I think the challenges are that when it comes to doing a lot of on-the-fly stuff, explaining really detailed things in not your native language can be fairly hard. So first of all, you need to come up with specific names for all different angles, spots, all that kind of stuff. Preferably, you'll have a lot of different protocols that you've planned for different scenarios and, that kind of stuff. I think that's where the potential problems lie. But then again, players are more and more skilled and have better and better game sense in general. It feels like as a game and the evolution has gone forward in FPS games, I think players' ability to look at the big picture and play what I call reacting correctly and being able to see kind of when someone calls something and they see what's going on in their radar, they know exactly what kind of move they need to do. I think that kind of thing has become better and better in individuals. So I think a lot of those things have become more automatic to these players, where communication has maybe become less important in certain aspects of the game, which then makes it easier for international teams to become a thing. But
do you think it has more to do? It has a lot to do with the growing pug scene, international pug scene, thanks to these things like FPL, Codes, hell, even matchmaking, right? Mixing with your friends.
It's also the accessibility of seeing pro players play and communicate, playing with one another through streaming, all this kind of stuff, when it becomes more exposed to a broader audience. So they don't need to learn these things themselves. Instead, they can learn and, take all that information from the pro players directly. So then it'll help them going forward if you have talent. And then if you apply those models you learn from the streams and what you see, then you will have more players that will have those things in the back of their head quicker. So you don't have to invent the wheel again.
Or rather, you don't need to actually be having that opportunity and taking that time with an in-game leader to teach you all of this stuff when you're already coming in. You have a basic formation that you've kind of figured out. I also think that, it's just like with the pugs, the fact that you're communicating in English, it's going to, instead of having to come up with a system from scratch or agree on names that everybody's going to know what to call, it's like if you're pugging all the time on FPL and you're listening to streams now of tournaments where you hear commentators say this is what this is called and blah, 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 you're going to start knowing the names a lot faster. And so that can probably cut down a little bit on the formation time. I mean, I don't think every team, because Flipside was a team at the time, and I don't know if they still run this, but for a while there, they had an interesting system that I thought that would obviously demand some work because you would have to learn how the system is and it would have to become second nature for you. But instead of having specific names for things, they referred to parts of the map as quadrants, as zones. Yeah. So it would be, instead of calling, he's on the short Mirage, it would be 3. He's calling, he's at 3. He's at 3 right now. And zone 3 would encompass, this space of the map. And so it wasn't so much, I think that's an interesting system because if, for example, what you're doing now when you hear somebody call, oh, he's Tetris, you're kind of just imagining, okay, with
Within
experience,
them.
you're going to start realizing that he can be a Tetris, but he can also be around these areas. Like if you actually have just a zone name where it encompasses Tetris and like the outside of pit, and it's like you just know zone. He's in that zone, and then you'll be like aware. It kind of cuts a step out of you having to just assume.
I think it's a thought process is that you wouldn't end up in a situation where someone's calling a specific spot and then you're so focused on that one specific spot that you're not taking into account the possibility of having maneuvered, left or right a little bit, and then you get caught up by surprise. So if you have that in your back of your head that he's within this region of the map, then you're prone to not be as focused into one specific area. So I can understand the thinking process behind that.
To come back to Nip very briefly, though, I think there was an interview, or it was quoted or commented somewhere. I think it was on Twitter. I can't exactly remember where I saw it, but apparently Nip are going to be looking for a sports coach as well now, a psychology, a shrink. They're going to be getting one as well, which is interesting because then, I mean, they certainly should have the means to offer that to their players. And it seems like Astralis, with all the success that they've had, I think even, Olafmeister, he said it because it was obviously going to get some laughs. It's like, we don't choke. But like, I don't think that's viable, right? I don't think that's viable. I think it's silly that it's if you have your opposition, your opponents that are doing something that is clearly working for them, why wouldn't you try and get that for yourself as well, so that you can continue to close the gap, even if you don't even need it? Air quotes, don't even need it.
Yeah.
Can it only do good for you, right? If it is a successful system for others.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean,
sports psychologist sounds pretty good.
To me too. I've been an advocate for this. We experimented with this with ENS as well at a point in time. Sort of like we had this test run with the Finnish Olympic Center, and they have a system there. They have a lot of people from when it comes to nutrition and like from psychological standpoint as well, coaching, just to try to see. Basically, what we were doing is trying to see what the differences are between a sportsman and an esports player.
Right.
But I do definitely think it's been a massive help for Astralis, and the vibe that I'm getting from some players is that they are not buying into it, but it's because of they're just used to their own ways, and they're being stubborn. But in my opinion, definitely I think a lot of teams should do that. NIP would definitely be on the top of my list. You've got some very interesting individuals there. Everyone knows a person like it, right, is super emotional, and that definitely affects his gameplay, and he'd be my number one person to that would definitely could get help from a sports psychologist to have his focus in the right things, and to have the right kind of thinking all the time, especially in a rough time like this. So it's definitely something every team should be open about, and at least give it a go.
Yeah. So one player that I was really impressed with this past weekend, and it kind of continues to speak to the depth that is in FaZe as far as the sheer skill that they have in that team, is Allu. Mm-hmm. And he had a standout tournament as far as I'm concerned. Watching him play, it was impressive. He was hitting shots. He was being aggressive. He was willing to take the fight, willing to take balanced risks, we'll say, right? Not just YOLO dumb shit, but actually like, okay, this happened, so I can take this risk now because in this system, this should be possible, right? You see him do this multiple times. It was Inferno that I really took a hard look at, and he played a very solid Inferno, at least in my opinion. So I mean, what's I mean, obviously you get to interact with him a bit more, but what is it that makes him such a standout player, and pretty much like the standout player for Finland right now, because he's really the only Finn that Finns have to cheer for? God, Allu.
Yeah. I mean, I've the first time I played with him goes back about 7 years or so, when he was 16 or something, 17 at the time, and he was already then very talented, just super aggressive, and didn't know when to fall back. He would go take a peek, take another peek. Right. If he gets 2 kills, he'd go for the third. It'd be just an endless loop. So I did my best at the time to try and sell in the idea of, you kind of have to, know when to be aggressive or not to be. And I think he's kind of finally finding the right balance. I think it's a work of art when he finds that flow in his play, when he is making plays such as on that Inferno game in the final, where he just knows the moment when he can take a peek towards secondary middle. He gets one, he falls back, he goes for another peek when he knows he can't do that. He hits that shot, he falls. It's just like, it's a natural ability. Some people it's a talent, obviously. Having that overall view of the game, he seems to have it a lot better than a lot of players do, and I think he's a great example of an aggressive opper when things are, when he finds the right flow. It is just, everything just goes his way. But at the same time, his issue, in my opinion, has been inconsistency at sometimes, because he would have strides when he's hitting all the shots in the world, and then have strides where he's missing a lot of shots in a row. So finding that golden middle of between the two is what he's gonna have to battle with. And I think this tournament was definitely something obviously I was looking at him with a magnifying glass, because I thought, in my world, that not all the changes that have happened in FaZe, all eyes are going to be on Allu and him performing, because he's going to be an op role, which is a super dominant role, one that can dictate the play a lot. And we all know that he has the qualities. Now it's all about being able to execute as an individual, but being a part of that system, and then helping his team out in tough situations when you, as an operator, need to be the one to open plays. And why is he the one that's the only one on the limelight right now? In the limelight right now, he's got the right work ethic. He's literally told me this is the longest he's been home since he joined the FaZe. But his first words were like, "That's a great month for me to grind the game." He's gonna be home and just playing nonstop. Trying to elevate his level even more. So I think that's what's really separating him from a lot of the rest, is that he's just a workhorse in terms of just playing the game, running deathmatch, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. The hard shit. MBK had a fantastic tweet that I really enjoyed, where it was a tweet, and I think we could find it if Phil, if we look at his Twitter, where he had the first monitor was DM and the second monitor was Katowice, and he's like, this is time for the hard work, right? But I have this for inspiration. And I was just like, that's what's up. That's where you get the hunger, right? Where you're watching those guys perform, and you're like, well, why am I not on that stage? Okay, time to put in the hours, right? I thought that was fantastic, because that right there is like the mentality that's going to be the difference between a team that does come back and gets back into the fight. Like G2 have all of the tools necessary, similar to Fnatic, right? I think it's just going to be a matter of them fine-tuning and figuring it out. And Shakti had a lot to say about that last week, obviously, about how certain players haven't even played with each other before. So yes, there's the talent, but now they have to figure out how to mix that talent so that it's actually a tasty dish and not just a hodgepodge of tasty dishes that don't really mix together. I don't know how to, whatever. It's a nice recipe. So, I mean, but it was refreshing to see that from a player, and just like, right, okay, put it out there, right? Like, this is, there are shitty parts of the job, like watching demos and DMing, where it's going to be boring and you're not going to want to do it, but you're going to do it because that's what's going to give you that edge the next time you are competing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, interesting. So, I mean, we might as well touch on this, and actually, we'll have another timestamp here as well, just so you guys can go and give it a watch, because I thought it was actually quite cool. Instead of it just being on Twitter, where everybody's giving their 140 character opinion on a topic, Thorin and Freakazoid had a chat together. Well, it lasted about half hour or so, and Freak was basically giving insight on what his observations are about the NA scene and what's happening with the players back behind the scenes. And so, I mean, we're talking about, in Finland, it seems that Allu's got that work ethic and that he's willing to grind and get in there. But Freakazoid's main point, I think, was just that doesn't really exist in NA, in the sense that nobody really wants to do the hard work. Everybody's too concerned about being a streamer, about money, about ego, about fame, about other things, instead of just saying, day in, day out, the grind is on.
Yeah, being a glorified streamer, basically.
That as well. Okay.
So, I mean, like Moses was tweeting. He was laying down the hammer last night.
Oh, dude, he went ham last night.
Yeah,
I wonder how much he had to drink.
True words, though.
But
probably a bunch. I mean, even though he said after Katowice he's not touching anything for a while. No, not exactly, but he's
torn apart. What else is there to do?
Yep, it's
pass CS and have some kush. You know, like, sorry,
exactly.
Not a lot, especially in Cologne. Not a lot going on over there. So you got Carnival. That's over now, I guess. But then you will have little Carnival. They're like fucking hobbits in Germany. You know, it's like we had Carnival, but what about second Carnival and third Carnival and 11sies? You know, and like what? Like they're just gonna keep going. So Moses, good luck, but I'm not buying it.
But yeah,
I'm looking at Phil, our German producer. He's loving it.
Well, it's true though. It's only fair. It is the way it is. I think these issues they extract into multiple layers. First of all, I think I think one of the issues is this is something NA has. If there's something Finland has, I think a lot of countries have that don't have a top team is that there's just not a lot of leadership. And I don't mean necessarily in-game leaders. I mean people that are the type, like if you would take from normal work world, you know, the sales manager type of guy who's going to be at the office 7:30, you know, to brew the coffee, you know, be there high-fiving people when they come to work at like, you know, just after 8 o'clock, right? So the people that keep that friggin' ship on the right course type of personalities, you know, who are making just, you know, kind of doing things for the unit to function better. Mm-hmm. And then obviously as well, the lack of in-game leaders doesn't help. But like you said, just the extra work when it comes to individual play, also when it comes to just basically analyzing the mistakes you're doing, you know, before practice, going through things, then, you know, playing a couple of practice games and then going through the mistakes that happened in that practice. What can we improve? You know, what kind of things everyone noticed, then play a couple more practice games, do the same thing, going through stuff. I think a lot of it comes down to just teams being lazy, people just being super lazy and not doing what they're supposed to do for their paycheck, basically.
Do you feel like it's too easy? Like, I know that we've talked about, there's this like holy grail out there, this idea of having an office. You have the team, and let's take, you know, I mean, it's not perfect yet for Astralis or even North, for example, but, you know, you're basing your facility in Copenhagen and everybody kind of lives around Copenhagen, and you go into the office, right? You have that setting where everybody's together, and the point that I'm getting at here is just that it's too easy, I think, to just tune out. If you're all spread out all over the place and you're working remotely and it's all about like, you know, basically team speak, you know, talking to your teammates, and then you all kind of log into Steam together and whatever. But once you log out of Steam, like there's no conversation past that unless somebody actually instigates it. There's no way to, you know, to keep on top of things, right? In the same way that if there was like an office scenario or like a training camp kind of scenario where it's just like you're there for X number of hours, and when you're there, you're busting your ass. And maybe you guys go out and get a drink afterwards because you worked hard that day, and so you can bond a little bit, right? You're going out, you're like, hey, let's go grab a beer at the bar, and then we'll head home, whatever, you know, like that sort of thing that can forge a unit past just getting wins, right? Because if you're counting on wins to carry your team, what happens when you don't get wins?
I think this is again a work ethic issue, and also the fact that everyone's so young, don't have any experience of being in a working relationship with people. Because I don't see an issue why you couldn't simulate the same thing online as well. You can as well, if you're a pro team and you're playing full time, you know, set up that everyone's going to be on their team speak 12 o'clock. You'll have a coffee together. Everyone goes dead matching for like an hour together. You're chit-chatting this and that while they're practicing individually. That's what hockey pros do. That's what everyone in sports do as well. You know, they'll go to the gym or whatever the fuck together, and they'll talk about whatever, you know, stuff while they're working out. Why wouldn't you be able to do the same thing and within an esports team online? And then you'll just separate the day into different segments, and then you'll have your own time as well in between when you can do about whatever you need to do as well. So I think, again, it comes down to just a lack of work ethic and discipline from people. And those are kind of measures that, you know, when you need to put people into a can together, It's just when people are not able to live like within certain principles that should be no-brainers to me at least. But then it's not always easy. These kids are young, and it's not something that sometimes doesn't happen naturally. You need to have that special someone that's going to direct the show.
Is that special someone then the coach or the manager, right?
Yeah, either
somebody who's just going to have that experience that you bring in for that purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's going to try and keep all the ducks in a row.
Rubber ducks, yeah.
Oh, I was thinking more like little ducklings running after home, but it works too.
I don't know. That was my first image for some reason. I don't know why.
Rubber ducks floating in the bathtub with the manager.
Yeah, because why not? All right, but yeah, there's so many excuses. I think like it comes to sports athletes, when it comes to esports players as well, that there's so many excuses always. This is not feeling right, or like whatever the hell. As long as there's no success, shut the hell up and work. Find ways to succeed. Evaluate yourself, what you're doing, the processes you're utilizing. Be the best critique of yourself, and accept feedback from others in your team without being that kind of guy who's always finding fault in his teammates. And no, but this happened and this happened. No, shut up. You fucked up in this situation. End of. And we'll learn from it. We'll move forward. These are the big issues that teams go by on a daily basis because of massive egos and inability to receiving criticism. And of course, there's only so many people in the world that are good at giving criticism as well. So it kind of goes both ways. But those are the fundamental issues.
What I wonder as well is, like, is there enough money to? I mean, because like I think it was Moses with this tweet, right, where he was saying, that there's no pros in NA. There's just pros who are trying to be streamers, basically, and who are using, right? I mean, could it be when you're getting fucking 20 grand a month in salary? Can the motivation to stream? Because imagine you're getting $2 grand salary per month to be a pro player, and you have the option to go and be a full-time streamer or a part-time streamer. Even part-time streamer, you're probably, with the right dedication to it, with if you are a popular player, right, all this sort of stuff, you can be making you could probably be getting up to 10,000 a month fairly quickly, or at least doubling it. We'll say, you're making like $5 grand a month as a streamer. Like where is the motivation then at that point, when the entire time in esports you're thinking my career can end at any point? I could put everything as the Hail Mary into this and try and be a pro player, and that may fail completely, or I can take the route where I'm at least guaranteed some kind of longevity as far as streaming and subs and all that sort of stuff, money, right, coming in that way. I mean, is it like different weights? I just wonder if it's like a cultural thing in NA where there's just different weights to it, where culture in NA, you're just supposed to make money, and that's the long and short of it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like it's a complicated matter. It's a complicated thing.
It always is, and money is obviously a factor. But if money is the one thing you're playing because of, get the hell out. Go stream. I mean, it has to be the passion. You have to have the will to win. You have to have, you kind of have to feel the necessity of being the best. Why the hell do you compete otherwise? Like, if money is the only driving force, go stream.
Or security when it comes to your career, etc.
Yeah,
I mean, your brand as well.
Yeah, and that should go without saying, though, that everyone should take care of their brand and all that kind of stuff. That's a different discussion, in my opinion. But when it comes to just genuine competition in itself, money should just be a added bonus. Play for the honor, the title, the need you have to win those championships. Basically, that needs to be the thing. If your thought process is that I'm making this and this much bank, then Jesus, I mean, that's not the way it goes. Money, it's like Astralis, for example, they just won $1 million. I'm sure that's a great thing for all of them. That's a lot of money, right? But for them, the best part is that they are now #1 team in the world. They've won big tournaments. They've achieved they've overcome massive mountains that they've built themselves in the last couple of years, right? So that's the actual gem here. not the money itself. Money
or
is
the
an
life
added
put on them. I mean, I'm not going to be like, there's no beating around the bush. The Dupree has had pretty hell of a fucking hard ride.
Yeah.
Over these past. So it's like, if you can criticize him for dropping off individually, it's it's just like, no. I mean, that's some heavy shit. Your dad having cancer. I mean, that's heavy. That's really hard to get your head around. So I mean, props to him for it's just like mountain props, right? Just like fucking biggest props you can possibly put on somebody for just
I think this is the tournament and the game is probably the best therapy you can have to cope with the situation as well. So it kind of works both ways. The game the game works as a way of therapy as well. Yeah, coping mechanism.
Definitely. I mean, it's definitely got something to it. It just feels like there's so many different factors going into this NA situation. But I mean, it could also be that it's at least when it comes to leading, or you're putting yourself out there. Is it better to be a part of the pack, or is it better to put yourself out there and try and actually lead this team? Like you're risking something if you're trying to lead, if you're trying to be an in-game leader or just a leader of the team, a captain or something along those lines. You are risking something in the sense that you're putting yourself out there. You're wearing your heart on your sleeve in a way.
Yeah,
could be that there's a reticence to do that as well right now. I mean, the transfer of the old guard to the new guard as well. I don't know. It's like this. We get a lot of this. It's interesting when you think of like Cloud9, for example, how things have worked out there, where you have veteran players, and this is in particular when I was talking about Stewie, where you have veteran players, and then you've got this young guy who comes in. He's expecting to get taught by these veteran players, and instead nobody wants to take over the lead role, and he's forced to do it because nobody else is going to do it when he's the one who's supposed to be learning from these guys. He's the one who comes in and just so that they can have a chance, decides to take it on himself when he's the heavy hitter. He's the star of the team. He should be focused wholly on just messing people up, and instead he's got to worry about what is going to keep nothing and Skadoodle happy and fragging. I mean, that's a real tough situation to find yourself in NA right now. It's a whole clusterfuck, it seems. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a very complicated topic, but I think again the lack of
we lack insight as well. We don't know what the hell is going on behind the scenes either.
I'm making assumptions through my own experience in the game, basically, and just by what we're talking with the players with. So you can add things together and make these kind of assumptions through that. But a lack of leadership. What we started off with kind of is where we can end it off too. It's just not having the kind of people that are good at being keeping their personnel happy, basically. That kind of people just don't come as often in the CS:GO community. You don't have that kind of people playing the games a lot of the time. Same applies to sports as well. You'll have, out of, let's say, hockey, or 20, 25 people, you'll have those 1, 2, 3 guys tops in the locker room that's going to be really vocal and keeping all those people happy and in the right mindset. And those kind of people are super valued. So it kind of goes to show when you are either an athlete or an esports player, then it's not very often you find these kind of people in these kind of jobs.
Gaming in particular, but I mean, it does seem like you do have that element of competition. At least in Europe, there are cases of it's like I was competitive in this sport. Let's take Device for example, with badminton, etc. It's just like, or Freiburg played hockey, or like there's a lot of players coming from that competitive side that then drift into actual CS. Why is it that I can't think of a single example when it comes to NA for that? There must be somebody with a sports background.
I'm pretty sure there is. I'm pretty sure Jordan played hockey.
Oh yeah, he played hockey, right? Yeah.
For example, and I'm sure there's, sports is very deep into the American culture, so I'm pretty sure a lot of them have different sports background, but it's just not talked about as often.
Well, I think the long and short of it is we have a long break now where there's going to be a lot of opportunity, a lot of time for all of these teams, NA and EU, to just sit down and focus. No travel. You're at home. You get to just find a rhythm, basically. I think that's the main thing that's going to be very interesting to see. And hell, I've been home for a week now, and it's been fantastic, because all of a sudden it's like I'm getting 8 hours of sleep a night, and I'm eating 3 meals a day, and I'm working out, and I'm able to have this rhythm of, right, like this is how my day goes day in, day out, and I can have some structure there. I think it's going to be good for a lot of the players out there to have that kind of structure, so that maybe it allows them to regenerate and get that focus going for the game again, instead of being on the road all the time, 3 weeks, 4 weeks in a row.
Listen, I can definitely agree, and you can see it from some of the caster talent people as well. I mean, you can definitely see some of them have lived basically their life off of a suitcase for a long ass time, and it will definitely leave scars. And everyone needs to have their normal life as well. And the players have had it very tough in the last couple of years. Especially this 2007, the early 2017 and 2016 was a mess in terms of how many tournaments and leagues was going on. Dude, as well.
2016, January, we were already on the road by the first week of January.
Yeah,
it's like holy shit. I mean, but it's interesting because thinking about this year, 2017. I mean, there's talks of oversaturation, right, and how that impacts things. But at the same time, it naturally weeds out. Like you have the big dogs, the big tournaments who are going to keep raising the bar until you just can't keep up anymore. And so, for example, like what happened to Gfinity? What happened to other tournament organizers that last year in March, there's a free week, we would have had a Gfinity or something. They aren't here anymore because the big tournaments have just kind of swallowed up the scene. But then that naturally kind of creates the space that we have now in March, where now in March we have 4 weeks where there's no LAN or meaningful like international LAN, right? And so we get to really just have that time. So it's like 2017 is going to be fascinating because the competition is only going to get higher and higher. If teams aren't constantly traveling for LANs, they have time to buckle down and work and regenerate. And that, I mean, having time to get rested, that is almost better for you than just grinding, because you're actually going to have some inspiration when you come back to the game. It's going to be fresh.
Imagine if we had. This is a whole different discussion that if we will go into this, it's going to be another hour. But just a quick pointer. Imagine if this, for like a month time span, we would have like a tournament for tier 2, tier 3 teams combined, where like the winner gets like a wild card spot to one of the major tournaments coming down later.
Yeah.
So you'd have like that path towards the top.
The thing is, it's not money, it's not viably economically, or at least nobody's put their attention into it yet because there hasn't been the space. When you had tier 1 tournaments every fucking weekend, then being like focusing on tier 2 or tier 3, it's like DreamHack were the only ones who had the balls to do it, and the only reason they did it is because they had the festivals. So they would just tack a tournament on, and then they're running a festival, and then CS happens to be there, but their main focus is the festival. So if they don't have all the tier 1 teams, it's not a disaster because it's a festival, right? But to intentionally set it up so that you're only having tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3 teams attending your event, not viable right now. But imagine like we're in a situation like this where it's like, well, there is a big dry spell. Imagine in 2 weeks we had a tier 2 tournament where there's only tier 2 teams that we don't see on an international basis. Then that space, I think there will be a shift there. You're right. It's good to bring it up because there has to be a shift there now where there might be enough space for it to be worthwhile, for it to make sense to do that kind of thing.
I mean, the return on investment when it comes to CS:GO right now is horrible for running a tournament. I mean, I've been a part of running budgets for different things in the past couple of years, and it's getting tougher in terms of viewership. If you're not putting in 7-figure money, you're not getting a lot of return out of it, just because of the fact of how
even when you're putting in 7-figure money, where's your return?
Yeah,
right?
it's getting worse, obviously. Yeah, but it's even worse when like you're not, if you compare it to other games, you're putting a lot less and you're getting a lot more out of it, type of scenario. So it's just because of the game has grown into a state where it is. But
do you think that there is a bubble that's coming? Like if we want to go hard on this topic, I mean, because we could get into the whole discussion of there being a bubble. Where do you get your return on investment for paying a player 20,000 euros a month as a team owner? Let alone the millions that it costs to actually run a tier 1 event with the venue and the stage and the stream and the staff and everything like that. It's just there's a lot going in, and when you don't have ticket sales, you're not selling online passes, you're hardly selling tickets for a reasonable sum. Like you're wholly reliant on sponsors to foot the bill.
Yeah, I mean, that's that there's only so much money you can really, so much big of a figure you can put into different things like content creation, and there's only
content creation is going to get the axe immediately because there's the fucking black hole of ROI, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that it's just it's I think it's a bit of a clusterfuck in a lot of ways. In terms of speaking of a bubble, I do feel like in a sense we are. I'm pretty sure we if only we would know like the amount of money that it's put on a show. Like I'm not sure about Katowice. I'm pretty sure they have a really good relationship with the city, but like any other tournament that is ran in a massive stadium, just the cost of it all when it comes to everything involved. There's so many moving parts, right? That being able to make money out of that, I have a hard time seeing it.
It's going to be a closely guarded secret. I mean, and this is all off of just assumptions from me, like putting together little tidbits of information. But I think a lot of it rolls down to second, like where esports isn't the main thing, isn't the focus, right? Like ESL run a shitload of white label productions, right? They get BlizzCon every year. They Gamescom. They're constantly working to work with like the casual side of things, and then esports is something that they put on top. And it's like DreamHack with their festivals, same sort of idea, right? Where DreamHack Summer and Winter, you got like what 20,000 people going in there buying tickets for the weekend,
more
right?
Than that.
There you go. There's some Skrilla. Like they're paying to be there on a day-to-day basis. Like there's money coming in there all of a sudden, along with all the sponsors and everybody who's going to get involved on the show floor. They have that whole hall where you have all like what Asus and Intel and all these guys, with booths and all that stuff. That's money that's coming in, right? Doing the esports thing, it's still interesting. I know it sounds really doom and gloom, but there's a lot to still figure out, I think, on how to progress and grow the industry, because I still don't think like when it comes to just pure esports that there's a working model yet, unless you're selling your Valve and you sell compendiums, in which case you're making fucking sick bank. But
you already have literally a money printing machine called Steam. So
yeah. Well, you're a game developer. That's where it's at. We need to go Too Good's route. Too Good figured it all out, bro. You go and you develop your own game and you make your Skrilla there. You become the developer, because being in the esports thing, it's for chumps.
You're an ass, Semmler.
Yeah, you will never be working with me again. And on that note, I think it's a good time to call it, man. Thanks a lot for coming on the show and chatting it up. Glad to hear your insight on the Finnish scene and what actually does go into running a team. Find all that fascinating. And maybe we talk more about it next week. But this week, we good. We
Gucci. Yeah. Good discussions.
All right, we Gucci. Thanks everybody for tuning in. See you all next week, Wednesday, 17 CET. Be sure to find the VODs on YouTube as well as SoundCloud if you want to listen to them going to work, school, hell, while you're at work and school. It's all up there on podcast as well. So we'll see you guys. Take care. Until next time.